Good morning. Good morning. This terrific Tuesday. I'm Elizabeth Inman. This is our Dream Big Today Bible study. We are on day 59. We're already 16% through the Bible already this year, 2023. February the 28th, our last day of February. There's Mama Mary. Good morning. Good morning. It's good talking to Sarah last night. Be sure and put your prayer requests in our comments. We love to be able to pray. Tara had a couple of prayer requests late last night, Donna, that we'll get in our prayer journal this morning. Good morning, Debbie. Hi, Rita. Good morning, everybody. We'll also take your praise reports. In fact, this morning we're reading Leviticus chapter 22 and 23. So we read all the way through the Bible. We start in January, end up in December. We've read all the way through the Bible. We do this year after year. There's sweet Michelle. Hi, Michelle. I was wondering if Michelle could do Bible study for me next Friday. I need to reach out to you, Michelle, visit with you about that. Anyway, we read all the way through the Bible. Every day there's an Old Testament, a New Testament, a Psalms, and a Proverbs. We've read all the way through the Bible. Quite an accomplishment. So we're, as of today, 16% through the Bible. And boy, it's just rich. And it just gets better and better and better every single year. Every year it gets better. This morning, as we're reading through Leviticus, we're reading about the annual festivals. And there's several things that stood out to me today as I read the annual festivals. But I thought this morning it might be fun if you're listening. Hi, Joyce. Hi, Nancy. Good morning. Good morning. If you would put in the comments for me what stuck out for you about the annual festivals. Was there something that was significant for you about the annual festivals today? I had 5 things that stuck out about the annual festivals for me this morning. The first thing that stuck out for me was right off the bat, these 2 words, no defects. No defects. And how over and over again through these Old Testament readings, no defects. The sacrificial lambs, the bulls, the goats, the sheep, the turtle doves, even the grain offerings could have no defects. And as I was reading today about what was considered a defect, I had this thought about, I'd never stopped to think about the man Jesus, the physical body of Jesus, because I know he was God incarnate into a physical body, God in the flesh for us, and that his fleshly body was indeed flesh, that he bled as a man bleeds. He had emotions that we experience, but this term no defects and how it was repeated over and over and over and over again, or even today, 2023, more than 2,000 years later, we're still learning exactly what God was doing, how he was setting it up. Here this is, and I don't know the timing, I didn't look it up, but probably somewhere around 2,000 years prior to Jesus' arrival, his physical arrival on earth. And God himself is preparing mankind for the arrival of a man with no defects. There's so much more I could say, but I got to move on because there's 4 other things that stood out to me. One of the other things that stood out to me is how many times just in today's reading, the Holy Assembly was mentioned. How so much of what was in today's reading was in preparation for the Holy Assembly. I counted 10 times, if my count is accurate. Again, I know I repeat myself, but I just share my thoughts. I want you to read for yourself. I want God to speak to you for yourself, not me. But I share my thoughts because I spent so many years reading this book and reading in particular the book of Leviticus that it was hard for me. I struggled. I literally cried. There was a time I cried to God, tears that, Lord, I don't know why I have to read this. I so much wanted to please him. I knew I was supposed to, but I didn't want to. And I didn't feel and didn't believe at that time I was getting anything out of it. Now, fast forward 20 years, and I know now looking back that even in those times that I read that I was crying because I didn't want to, I didn't believe I was getting anything, that the Bible says, and God tells me that his word never returns void. If I will sacrifice, oh, there's that word. If I will offer up my time, or an offering to the Lord of my time to read, that he will honor that, and that inside of me something is being done. He will reward me for my offering. He will reward me for my sacrifice, and that there is a work, a renewing of my mind is taking place. But not knowing that at the time, it was so difficult for me. So that is exactly how come I do this Bible study, is so that those of us who will offer our time, sacrifice our ego to come on early in the morning and teach, to share thoughts and ideas with you guys, to encourage you to read for yourself. Good morning, Mick. One of my favorite people in the whole universe. Tell your beautiful bride I love her, and she's my favorite too. I love Mick and Lisa. So back to the comment about Holy Assembly. You've heard me say this so many times. When God repeats himself, he's making a point. Just in today's reading, he makes a point that he is preparing them for Holy Assembly. I so often talk about that God created us for fellowship, that we're not meant to do life alone. I so often talk about how important it is for us to have a church family, that we are meant for fellowship. We're created for fellowship. We're not meant to be isolated. If the enemy can isolate us, he can defeat us. He'll use all kinds of things to deceive us, to keep us away from church. He'll use the flu season. He'll use COVID. He'll use politics inside of the church. He'll use denominational fights. He will use a split in the church. He will use sprinkling instead of submersion. He will use traditions and mechanisms. He'll use the type of music that's played. He will use an off-key singer. He will use, the list is miles and miles long of how the enemy uses things at church to keep us away from church, because it is so important to God that we participate in the Holy Assembly. Because in the Holy Assembly, we're better together. There is a power in the corporate anointing. There is a power in the unity of the saints. There is power in corporate prayer, and the list goes on. 10 times in today's reading alone. I've never seen that before. The grain offering. This is the year, for some reason. Earlier, when I was doing Bible study, I pointed out the 5 different offerings, the purification offering, the grain offering, and I pointed out what I had written down a few years ago about those offerings. And I, a few years ago, wrote down that in my research that the grain offering was considered the most holy of the offerings. And for some reason this year, that stuck with me. So now it's like every time I read something about the grain offering, it's like I'm focusing in on that. I know that God is teaching me new things. Maybe not all of it is in my awareness for this year, but I know that He started me on a new journey about grain offerings. Anybody else? I mean, for me this year, I'm just sharing my journey with you. I don't have anything I can truly just articulate to you, but grain offering is something else that just keeps popping up to me over and over again. And then this is something else that's been a multi-year journey for me. The word's complete rest. It's been Sabbath rest for a long time. The Sabbath, it started with the Sabbath. It started with, oh Lord, forgive me in my shallowness. It started with me wanting to know about the Sabbath, wanting to know why we have a whole denomination that is built around a Saturday. I grew up with a woman that from the time I met her was old. She lived to be 106. So when I was a little girl and we moved in across the street from her, she was old in my mind. And I loved her. I loved her from the first time I met her. And she went to a denomination and participated in the rituals of a church that believed in the Sabbath. And she would read her lessons to me. And she did not cook from sundown on Friday until sundown on Saturday. And she lived that way and she believed that way. And I honored her beliefs and I still honor her beliefs. And it created a curiosity in me that when I got my heart back right with the Lord, started me on a journey of, once again, I told you guys, I started this journey when I picked up the 1-year Bible and said, God, I want to know you. And the reason I made the decision to read from the front cover to the back cover of a Bible was, in the beginning was the Word, was with God, and the Word is God. I want to know God's heart. I don't want to know what a denomination teaches. I don't want to know what a preacher teaches. I don't want to know what my next door neighbor, my family, or anybody else teaches. I want to know what God says. And I'm just being real and brutally transparent with you guys. What started my journey, wanting to understand God's heart about Sabbath. And it has grown and it has grown and it has grown. And on February the 28th of 2023, today's reading, I didn't count how many times, but over and over and over again, complete rest popped out at me. So did the words. Golly, I hope I should have underlined this. I probably did underline it, but I didn't. I can't just go right to it. That says that this will be with you forever, that this is a law that'll never go away. I'm also learning that as I'm reading in the Old Testament, that when I read that this is a law that will last forever, that really is a true statement. I've gone full circle. So I start right here and I go full circle that, well, it's a law that lasts forever. And I believe that at face value to, oh, well, Jesus fulfilled the law. Well, Jesus did away with the law. Well, Jesus fulfilled the law. Well, that's a law that'll last forever. And here I am again. And it's just that by the time I make full circle, it doesn't look like, when I start this journey, it's a very physical thing for me. It's a law that'll last forever, and it's very physical. And then by the time I make my circle of seeking God, seeking God, seeking God, He takes me from the outer court of the very physical things that are real, historical things, into the inner court, into the holy place, and then into the Holy of Holies where everything's spiritual. And then He takes me right back again and I get to go out to the outer court and everything's spiritual. And it's like, Oh, oh. And I have a greater depth and level of spiritual understanding of physical things. And I'm changed and I'm renewed. And my mind no longer thinks about things the same way I did when I started that journey. Ah, and sometimes I have a hard time even explaining what I just said. Complete rest is one of those topics. Um, I just wish I could have gotten the spiritual side of complete rest, Sabbath rest, in my 20s, when I used to run around like a mad woman if I was going to have company. I mean, my house was the cleanest the 2 hours right before I had company that it ever was any other time, because I ran around like a mad woman cleaning up every little nook and cranny. I mean, I would dust the corners, the baseboards in the corner, wouldn't I, Mom? I mean, to tell you, if I was having company, there wouldn't have been a spot. And I look around right now and see there's a bottle of glue sitting over there. There's coasters sitting over there. There's a table runner folded up over there. None of that back in the day. I can rest with those things there now. I can rest. I still don't like it. I still don't like it, but I can rest. Complete rest. Resting in Him. Complete rest. He was teaching them that. See, we can get a truer picture of what it is to trust in God without doing a single solitary thing. Man, why did it take me so long to get that? Complete trust jumped out at me today. And then, oh man, another good one. How many times in today's reading were they required to give special gifts to the Lord? Special gifts. I underlined them. I didn't count them, but I underlined them. I underlined special gifts. Where did we lose it? When did we get so selfish with the things that belong to us? When did we decide that our homes was no longer open to the traveler that passes through that needs a bed at night? When did we decide that our homes didn't belong to God, that we had a right to refuse somebody our bed? When did we get so selfish that the food that's on our table, that we wouldn't give to a passerby? I mean, when did we get so selfish that the shoes on our feet, we won't take them off and give them to somebody? I mean, one of the simplest things that I did in my early years of learning how to give, there's a gentleman in this town that when he sees me, he still tells this story. And it honestly, sometimes it embarrasses me. And I'm only going to share it to make my point, because this isn't about me. Special gifts to the Lord. It's about how simple something can be. I had bought myself some brand new snow boots, and it had snowed. I'd never worn them before because it doesn't snow in Oklahoma very often. And there was about 4 inches of snow on the ground. And it was my first time to wear these snow boots. And if you know me, I can be a little eccentric. So these boots had a lot of fur on them, let's just say. You noticed me when I walked in the room. And there was this young lady at church that the moment I walked in, all she could talk about is how much she loved my boots. So she talked about them before the service, and then after the service, she mentioned again how much she loved my boots. I knew that her husband was in prison. I knew how faithful she had been. There was never a church service that went by that she didn't raise her hand and asked us to remember her husband in prison. I knew that she supported herself as a single parent. Single as in her husband was in prison. She was still married, but supporting her children, and that money was tight. These were an expensive pair of boots. And the good Lord spoke to me, and I knew what I was supposed to do. And I sat there on the church pew and I took those boots off and I gave them to her. And all she could think about is I was going to have to walk to the car in the snow, barefooted. It wasn't even 10 feet to my car, and I lived less than a mile from the church. And this gentleman in our church, still to this day, talks about me giving my boots to this woman. I only say this to emphasize how easy it is for us to give special gifts. And yet, something as simple as taking off my shoes, quite frankly, probably my feet were sweaty that day. Do you understand what I'm saying? When did we get to the point that we won't take our shoes off and give them to somebody less fortunate than us? I read this, and for some reason, in the last 2 years, reading how often they were required to give, and their giving back in this day was at great cost. Great cost. See, it cost me nothing that day to sit down, take my boots off, and hand them to that woman. My feet didn't hurt walking to the car that day, and I got home that day and was able to put on another pair of shoes before my feet ever got really very cold that day. What did it cost me? Is my point. You understand what I'm saying? We don't have that mindset in America anymore. It's not a blanket statement. There's those of you on here that are so far advanced over me that you've already emptied out your closets 10 times and given them away. You've already done that. You're so far along, and I want to be like you. I want it to be that when I read that they gave special gifts to the Lord, I smile and say, Lord, what else you want me to give? Instead of me being convicted that, oh, I ought to be given more. I should be given more. Special gifts to the Lord. So, grain offering, holy assembly, complete rest, special gifts to the Lord, no defects. That's what I got out of the Old Testament reading today. And then I've used up so much of my time, like I always do. It's just such good reading. Such good reading. I want to read in Mark chapter 9. Actually, it's not even that I want to read, but I want to start in verse 38. John said to Jesus, Teacher, we saw someone using your name to cast out demons, but we told him to stop because he wasn't in our group. Don't stop him, Jesus said. No one who performs a miracle in my name will soon be able to speak evil of me. Anyone who is not against us is for us. If anyone gives you even a cup of water because you belong to the Messiah, I tell you the truth, that person will surely be rewarded. But if you cause one of these little ones who trust in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to be thrown into the sea with a large millstone hung around your neck. There are so many times that I've been asked, how did that mega preacher ever get where he got and then all of a sudden fall because he had a affair on his wife and got caught? How did that mega preacher end up in a homosexual situation? Or how does that person think they have a right to have any kind of a ministry when we know what they're out there doing? How is it that they're not even totally set free themselves yet, and they think they've got the right to go into ministry? That's the answer. I mean, that's our answer right there. I mean, if it was based on our qualifications and our holiness and our righteousness to live a pure life, there's not one of us that would be up in a pulpit. There's not one of us that would be qualified to lay hands on and pray for anybody. Not one. Not one. Not one. Not one. I mean, to me, this This right here says it all for us. Yeah, that person may not have it all together yet, but they know they're called and they're stepping into the call. God will do the rest. God will continue the purification because, see, it's not about our own righteousness anyway. It's about the righteousness that He imputes into our spirit man and seals it. And then from the inside out, He renews us. So we're all a work in progress. And then we've got scriptures like, he who's been given much, much is required. God will take care of it. God will take care of it. God will take care of it. So stop sitting in the judgment seat. I mean, who told you that you're the one that's supposed to be the judge and jury over the preachers of the day? There used to be somebody really, really big that had written a couple of books that was supposed to be an authority on lots of different doctrines and theologies. That I'm not going to name the name of the book because I don't want to sit in the judgment seat, but everybody would recognize it. And it was one of my go-tos that I'd get somebody that'd say, well, what is the difference between this and this and this? This church does it this way. This church does it this way. This church. And I would go to this person's book and there would be these explanations. And I think an awful lot of it was really, really, really good. But this person's home ministry that started out giving us some simple answers to how things evolved from maybe the way the Old Testament laws required things and how it evolved into the way we do things now after Jesus Christ, into the last several books that I knew of that this person wrote was all about modern day mega preachers and condemning them and pointing out all the flaws. I mean, if they said one thing wrong, they'd write a whole chapter on that one thing they said wrong and condemning them, and then being so bold to tell everybody, you can't listen to this person. They're a heretic, they're fanatical, they're they're the Antichrist. I mean, and I mean, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Ah, it all begins and ends with love. Yes, we have a spiritual gift of discernment that will warn us of the things we're not supposed to associate ourselves with. Yes, we have that. Yes, there is a righteous judgment. And even the righteous judgment, the power behind that is our love. Our love. Yes, we love people enough that will tell them the truth and the truth will set them free. To me, this right here just answers to right here. This is my only justification for feeling like I can come on and do a live video. Because you know what? I'm not perfect. I don't have I'm reminding you guys all the time. I don't have a doctorate, I don't have a degree in doctrine or theology or seminary or whatever. I just read my Bible every day. And I share with you what I read. I've been corrected a couple of 2 or 3 times, maybe more. I just want to share my heart. I want to share my journey. I want to get better and better. I want God to continue to speak to me. But you know what? I want my correction to come from the Lord. I want to listen to Him. And I want to be the one that encourages you not to listen to man, to listen to the one voice, the one voice. It's why I don't promote lots of preachers openly, publicly. I want you to hear from Him. And even if you're listening to preachers, I have preachers I listen to, but when I listen to them, they better be able to back it up here, or I won't be listening to them. This is what confirms what he is speaking to us. They had the Rhema word long before they had the written word. So good. So good. There's lots of good stuff in Mark today. Lots of other things. Psalm 64, verse 7, you are the one who gives us victory over our enemies. You disgrace those who hate us. And then let's see what year it was, 2012. I don't know. Proverbs 10:19. Too much talk leads to sin. I'm already 1 minute over today, and I started on time. Be sensible and keep your mouth shut. I think it's time for me to end today. I love you guys. Bye-bye.